Hello, everyone. This is Mark Plaster, Senior Executive Editor of Emergency Physicians Monthly, and you are listening to EP Talk, the place where emergency physicians and those related to our profession and specialty come to talk about things that are relevant to our professional lives, sometimes our personal lives, and particularly EP Talk has focused in on innovations and innovators and things that help our profession do its job better. And today we're happy to welcome Terri Wolcott, and we're going to be talking about fleet signal boosters, and particularly it's sponsored by Wilson Electronics. But I'm going to tell you a little bit more, or let Terri tell you a little bit more about what fleet signal boosters are about, and then maybe talk a little bit about some specific applications. Terri?
Thanks, Mark. Basically what a fleet signal booster is, it's a cellular booster that provides stronger, more reliable cellular signal in your vehicle for all onboard cellular devices, such as phones, smartphones, computers, tablets, dispatch devices, cradle points, and many other devices, allowing folks to receive signal in tough areas of coverage where there's little or no signal.
I told you before we got started that I'm familiar with that exact problem because I live, though I'm very close to Washington, D.C., I live outside of Annapolis down in what we call Southern Maryland or Slower Maryland. And it's down toward the water, and live off of Muddy Creek Road, which says all it needs to say about the remoteness of it. And there are spots that if I were to have an accident on Muddy Creek Road, that most likely you would not pick up a signal, and I might have to run a quarter mile if I could to pick up a signal. So certainly, and maybe this occurs in cities as well, where signals are not as strong, and when information has to be transmitted or received, and it's life-saving, it's incredibly important. I mean, in today's in today's environment, it's incredibly important that first responders, physicians, even people just driving their own cars, would be able to constantly, 100% of the time, have a reliable cell signal. And yet we know that in many places across the country, that's not true.
Yes, and that's very much a problem within your industry and across fleets across the United States. Wilson actually got into the business 50 years ago, and Jim Wilson had a heritage of innovation all the way back to the CB days. We currently hold 50 patents in innovative technology, and all we deal with is boosters for in-building, in-vehicle, to enhance signals on all carriers, on all networks. And basically, Mark, what that means for you guys in your industry, we're having lots of success with 240 million 911 calls. You personally have had some experience with that. And do you have any life-threatening situations that you experienced with lack of cellular coverage?
Well, of course. I mean, if I actually was the first responder of a vehicle that left the road on Muddy Creek and hit a tree. And in order to get, I was really concerned. It turned out to not be that particular location, but I was concerned that we would not be able to, I'd have to leave the patient in the vehicle and drive someplace else in order to get a signal. So yes, I've seen it myself.
Yeah, and we've seen that quite a bit. And it's rural areas, it's mountainous terrains. Right. It can be all different types of landscape. It could even be weather that dispatchers have issues trying to get to the ambulance and the EMS technicians, or finding with the EMS technicians is that relaying vital information back to the hospital on the patient so that they can be admitted immediately and have the proper care, the proper critical care, is absolutely a necessity. So
Right.
we actually asked a gentleman that had a very successful experience with our boosters, and we did an interview with him. His name was Mark Champagne, and he was actually a lieutenant on the Lisbon Volunteer Fire Department. And why this is important is,
Where
go
is
ahead.
Lisbon? Where is Lisbon?
Lisbon is in rural New Hampshire.
Oh, okay.
So when you talk about Muddy Creek Road, rural New Hampshire is even more of a challenge. And as you can imagine. So what we did is we spoke with him. We had some time to kind of dissect the problem. And we explained to him that our solution, which is called a Drive Reach OTR fleet booster, was the best thing for him. He had run into two situations that particularly bothered him. The ongoing inability to provide vital information was one issue. Obviously, safety and accidents, just like you said, was another area of concern. But he actually had a situation where he was unable to make an important phone call because of weak signal, and the dispatcher was trying to communicate to him a phone where a key was hidden and wanted him to call by phone rather than dispatch over the air. Now, the way that worked was he couldn't get the call, and it created a very bad situation. So at that point, he reached out to us to ask about what this technology provided.
So,
That being, go ahead.
Okay. Now you got me. Now, how did you fix it?
So the way we fixed it was we installed the Drive Fleet Reach OTR booster. Now, when I say OTR, it's called an over the road. And the reason we named it that is because it gives the idea of a booster, a CB antenna. But the way it works is basically the antenna outside of the vehicle receives a signal and it comes into a booster, which is about, Mark, the size of your hand. And the antenna, there's an antenna as well inside the booster, which grabs it and takes it to the booster. The signal gets amplified, and then the signal is sent back out amplified. So basically, the signal comes in, it gets amplified, the signal goes out, it gets amplified. What does that mean? That means in areas of very low cellular coverage, your signal could be boosted up to 50, 75%. And it's the highest performing mobile booster on the market. So it not only does it help with the calls, it helps with all in-vehicle technology, even like an iPad and data transmission.
Interesting. So this is not just something for, I mean, obviously it has application to ambulances and police vehicles and first responders, but this is actually something that anybody who's traveling in a vehicle remotely who wants a stronger signal could actually utilize.
Absolutely. And it's not even just remotely, it could be interstate. It could also be in cities. You think about the specialty glass they have in a downtown area. The signals actually bounce off that glass. So the booster can go out and find the best tower if there's a tower, say, overloaded. And it can bring it back to back into the vehicle. And I can give you an example. Even in your area, we had a police department come to us, and it was just a little bit outside of Baltimore in a very busy suburban area, and they were having trouble getting their dispatch calls because of overloaded towers. So they came to us and said, can you help us? Because we can't even get our calls to respond. And so that was another use of the booster that we were able to develop for them.
So it's not just an amplifier. You're actually looking for the strongest signal to amplify.
Correct. You are exactly correct. That's a very good statement. And because most people say, oh, it goes out and it grabs a signal. Well, signals have what they call bands, and I'm not going to get into technical pieces of this because quite honestly, that's for my engineering department. But just to give you an idea, it's like if you had a cell phone that was a cell phone 5 versus a cell phone 11 plus. So now, if you think of that in terms of signal, what's going to happen is the signal's going to go out and grab the tower that's the strongest. And the reason that's important is because there's a lot of towers that are overloaded. There's a lot of towers that aren't very strong. And, we're really experiencing something that I find very interesting, which is new to really the US. And I refer to it as the COVID effect.
Okay.
And the reason I refer to it as the COVID effect is because if you start to think of the effect that COVID's had on our nation, you're operating remote now, Mark, are you?
I am.
That in cases like that, lots of folks are relying on cellular technology only, not Wi-Fi. So what we're finding is there's been much more overloaded towers. There's been slower reception for, like you said, emergency vehicles across the country, but also large, like if you think about an Amazon fleet where communication is critical. We're finding that because of COVID and because of the additional teaching, the additional data, the additional social media, that there's even much more of a need for these boosters than ever before.
Fascinating. I think you're right. In fact, I know you're right. And and we're only going to add to that. One of the things that I've been involved in for the last couple of decades has been promoting telemedicine. And in fact, we started the first telemedicine magazine a decade ago, and it was kind of ahead of its time. And so people were sort of saying, yeah, telemedicine's a good idea, but I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. And it's kind of a pie in the sky kind of deal. And boom, we get hit with the COVID-19, and everything is going by telemedicine. And they're trying to figure out how to really expand it, and all the barriers they had thrown in front of patients seeing doctors telemetrically all came down literally overnight. Suddenly, we were talking about HIPAA compliant platforms, yada, yada, yada. And the next thing you know, they say FaceTime is just fine. You can talk to your doctor on FaceTime. And all these really complex HIPAA compliant platforms almost disappeared overnight. And it was all because of need. You're right, COVID-19. And the interesting thing about that is that it really fundamentally changed how we could very soon see the delivery of care. And at least in a certain number of patients, we may in fact bring back, quote, house calls. House calls may be made by NPs, PAs, nurses, some kind of mid-level provider who's in contact with a physician located in a remote site. And maybe 2 or 3. I talked to an entrepreneur who started providing care for nursing homes because we realized we were spending a fortune transporting all these elderly patients to the emergency department, when really, in fact, if they dispatched a paramedic out there with a mobile lab that they could work with, or with a lab that had been installed in the nursing home. They were able to cut admissions to the transportations to the emergency department by 40%. 40%.
Wow.
Okay, and if you kind of do a little bit of the numbers about elder care, and you realize that 60% of your entire life's expenditures on healthcare are going to be spent in the last 2 years of your life. Okay, the amount of money being spent for elder care, particularly patients coming from nursing homes, is astronomical. And what he had basically said is that if I could get a paramedic out there with a connection to a professional in emergency physician, who he becomes the NPPA becomes the eyes and ears of the physician, and they can perform 80-90% of the things that need to be done and keep them out of the emergency department. And again, the need for COVID really showed us that we need to keep people in place. We don't want to bring them in and get them infected and bring them back and spread things around. We want to keep them in place. And so suddenly the idea of having telemetric contact between an extender or a patient or whatever has become like a major priority. So you can imagine if we suddenly say we're going to add 40 million visits, emergency, 40 million patient encounters to our current cellular load, what's that going to do?
Right.
You're right. It's and I think that's an astute observation to call it the COVID effect, because everybody now is trying to work from home. They're seeing the benefits of working remotely, and what we thought was adequate communication capabilities turns out to be not so capable, or maybe not up to the speed and capability that we want. And so these are the kinds of things that are going to be very, very important. The things that can take a small signal or a weak signal and boost it and make it available not only geographically but also stronger, would be, I think, an incredible addition to our lives, both just for our personal connectivity, but also certainly healthcare. So this is an interesting innovation. It doesn't sound like it's come. You've been around a long time, but certainly the importance of it has become more evident just in the last few months.
Absolutely. I've been in vehicles and anything pretty much that goes in, on, or under a vehicle. I worked for Fiat Chrysler for a long time, so I saw the impact of technology on vehicles, and I've seen the impact even of the electric vehicles which are coming. Everything is going to the cellular platform. It's interesting to me that we don't hear so much about it from the carriers, because they don't necessarily want you to know that maybe the signal's not quite as good as it should be. And while they're working on developing more towers, there's not really that many towers if you think of the population of the United States. There's only 307,000 cellular towers in the US. And if you compare that to 326 million people utilizing 95% of phone and other technologies, it's astounding.
Yeah. No, I hear you. And it's a rising tide any way you look at it, because if you're building towers while the need is rising as well, you could be building and expanding and still getting further behind.
Absolutely. And that's where we're really finding the Drive Reach OTR fleet is really coming into play. And it's funny because one of the things you mentioned was telemedicine, and I never even thought about that. But I, during COVID, had a sinus ear infection going on, and I waited 3.5 hours for a phone call back on telemedicine, and I got disconnected. And,
Oh.
I know I know it wasn't on my end because I had 5 bars. And so you have to understand at that point in time, it was chaos within our system, and you, you have to be very forgiving of what happened, but it just totally magnifies the issue of the problem, and that's an area I've never even really thought about. But
Right.
that's and the other interesting thing is I have 4 boys, and they're older, and 2 of them actually work from home and will be working from home. One said for the next 2 years, and another said through the first quarter of 2021. They do not use any Wi-Fi. They are solely cellular technology with hotspots. So that hotspot usage across the country has just skyrocketed. And
Right.
That's another area. So that's going to further complicate, this usage. And if you think about the telemedicine piece of it and the hotspot usage, you can't really fathom it, really. I mean, just like you said, the numbers are crazy.
Yeah, and I hate to even expand the problem, but a lot of kids, a lot of college kids, high school kids are not going back to school. Period. They're not. Yeah,
Correct.
there's going to be a lot more students who say, I want to work remotely. I want to work from home. And so you're absolutely right. This generation is tied to their cellular technologies, and this could very easily blow out of proportion, and they would not be able to keep up with it. So I can see that being able to amplify a weak signal would be of critical importance. Would actually put you ahead of the curve, like as you said.
Yeah, and the interesting part about our company, Wilson Electronics, is with the mobile technology and with the mobile boosters, we're continually working on improving those and always looking for applications where we can tie directly into, changing the world in terms of mobile technology and working with other carriers. We've actually worked with the FCC to help develop some of the stringent requirements around this technology, because there was a lot of Chinese companies coming in, and they were using as non-superior products, and they were actually blowing out cell towers. So
No, we don't need that.
yeah, so that became a problem. So Mr. Wilson worked with Verizon and the FCC to put in pretty stringent regulation so that they know what devices are out there, what they're working on, and how it moves forward. Another area we didn't really touch on was that I get a lot of questions on is what about the 5G network?
Right.
And the 5G network is coming and right now it is in a lot of areas, but it's more in in remote areas, in terms of not really remote, but like a smaller college campus, or maybe a town center where its radius is very small. Once the towers get up with the 5G signal, the 5G signal everybody thinks is just one signal, one band. What it actually does is it takes the old technology and marries it with the new technology, so you have almost 2 bands working together. And where the booster will come in there it will even make that signal stronger. So it will work with both bands to amplify the technology. So we're really looking for good performance there as well.
That's great. Well, that's been very, very enlightening. I appreciate you coming on the podcast to talk about this. And now the obvious question is for people listening to this, if you're in a remote location and this is a problem, or if you're just simply a person who would like to be able to boost the signal in your vehicle or your location, how do they go about contacting Wilson Electronics?
We're very easy to contact. we can be reached on www.wilsonelectronics.com, or www, if you want to read some blog articles, .wilsonpro.com. You can reach out via our website. Now we do have some other folks that represent our products, so it's important that it is Wilson Electronics on Google. It'll take you right in. You click on fleet, and it'll take you to all the information on the Drive Reach OTR and the Drive Reach fleet, which are the most popular boosters on the market.
That's cool. Well, Terri, thank you so much. You've been very enlightening. I wasn't sure what I was going to hear today, and I'll be honest with you, this is something I probably will look into myself, because, like I say, I'm in a remote area many times, and I travel back and forth to Virginia, where my daughter and son-in-law. I'm in Virginia now because she's expecting to have her baby any moment. And so I'm grandpa waiting to take care of the grandchildren. But coming down here, there were large sections of the highway in Interstate 95 going south, where you have no cell signal or very weak cell signal. And those are that's the things that a grandpa like me would certainly like to be part of the past. So thanks for coming on the podcast, and I hope that the listeners today, if you have any interest, check out Wilson Electronics. And thanks for joining EP Talk today.